Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to the Comic Base live stream. This is a kind of a special one here, and it occurred to me as I was setting this one up that I probably could have an entire YouTube channel, which is nothing but comic book con games. It actually would probably be way cooler than our usual. Let's talk about weird little fussy things about the world's biggest collecting software, and what kind of obscure features are going on with that one. But yeah, no, it's one that got suggested to us by some people on the Slack here, our internal discussion group, where a news item had come up about a particular. Let's just say scheme. Let's be pleasant for now. That is something new in the world of comics. But when I was kind of setting up for the show, I realized that there's a heck of a lot of things in the world of comics that are charitably for entertainment purposes only, and not charitably outright freaking scams. And it'd probably be worth talking about how some of those actually operate. But before we get into it too much, I do want to say hi to everyone here. Richard Scott first in the house here, Oro Viejo joining us, Robbie Weinberg. Looks like everyone's weather is warming up, and thank God for Franklin, Tennessee. It's finally, we're out of the zeros and everything else like that. My Bernese Mountain Dog is miserable, but I am much happier now. Brian Stewart, yeah, people are hitting like it's like spring out there. Department of Comics, welcome from Florida. Greg Hecht, our moderators in the house here. So hopefully the production won't be quite as rocky as it is when I'm trying to work the show on my own. Jet Set Comics, hi, how's it going? Mike Beam, welcome everybody. And let's see, and please, everyone, do hit the like button. I'd say if hit the like button if you like shows about either comic software, comics in general, pop culture, or in this case, magic tricks, scams, con games, and grifts, or just quants. If you're a data geek and you really get off on calculating probabilities of scams, this one's going to be your show. It's years in the making. Anyway, welcome Ed from Toronto, Steve Herring joining us from North Carolina. Anyway, welcome everyone. Before we get down to business, I have a little bit of a business to take care of on the whole thing. Let me close some windows because I am getting absolutely baffled by just all the gunk on my screen right now. But anyway, first, Comic Base, the current version is 25.5.1.2222. That is the kind of stuff that makes the audience just immediately say, I am reaching for the Salmonex. But no, there's a very, very small build, unless one of a number of very small things has happened to you. Those small things being, if you've had any problems at all with your conditions not being set up properly in converting from an old version of, say, Comic Base, and you didn't somehow get a proper conversion of the mid and high value breakdowns that we're using now in Comic Base 2025 to better calculate the values of CGC Comics. If you've had any issues with that, please download the latest build. If you are incredibly fussy about how you like your title divider labels printing, we offer you some not only support for some very new, very, very small labels for this one in the new version, but we also let you tailor how it prints the title divider. So if you're the kind of guy who's like, no, I do not, if my label's even bigger than the tab, I don't want to fall down below where I'd be able to see it, you can customize that to your heart's content now. That is a thing that happens, and we also make it a little bit more bulletproof if you've somehow gotten some kind of bad pricing data into your database and you're trying to generate reports. At least one thing that managed to do in the program before can no longer do it in. So anyway, if that does not apply to you, do not worry about any of this stuff. It's not of great importance because we're going to move on to other things. I'm going to have some other news that's probably a lot more interesting coming up in future weeks of stuff that we're doing with Comic Base. Sorry, my eyes are all over the place because I'm trying desperately to arrange my windows to show you the scam of the day. But anyway, what's his name? Just pushing on. Don't worry about it. We will have cool new Comic Basey things to talk about later. All right, so let's first of all get into a very I want to talk about scams, a particular type of comic scam in general, and then I wanted to go into the particulars of really a quite interesting novel take on this one. But let's start with the basics. So there's a thing in comics, and we are all probably old enough to remember the buy 3 comics for $1 down at your local Tom Thumb, and it would come in a little plastic bag. It would say like 3 comics for $1. I'm simulating it here because I don't have either right now, and this is a date, from an age. Imagine that these are 35-cent copies of, the latest issue of Spider-Man and maybe some crappy DC title that you didn't care much about. And then the question is, what the heck is in the middle? And the person at the local Tom Thumb would really very much like you not to rip the bag open and try to figure out what the middle book was. But if you're sitting there and you're wondering whether this particular bag of 3 comics for $1 is worth your hard-won $1, back, cast your mind back to 1975 or so. This was when I was, spending my money as a paper boy. You'd sit there and you'd go through all the packs, and you kind of say, well, this is a title I really, really like. This title I kind of like it. I could read it. And it's like, oh God, Charlton. You'd look and you'd kind of look at the first 2 you could see, and then you'd stare like crazy at that little edge thing and try to do any number of weird little tricks to bow the bag and flex it so you could get a look at like the 1/4 inch of spine to figure out, is it at least, if it's not like the Hulk, is at least not an Archie. That's like the worst thing ever, is if it's like, oh man, bought the thing I thought I was getting kind of like a mediocre issue of the Hulk, a mediocre issue of Marvel double feature, and in the middle of the damn thing is like Little Lulu, or actually it wouldn't be Little Lulu, but it'd be some comic that was just like the worst comic ever. The economics of this one it's pretty compelling if you're a kid. It's you're getting $1.05 worth of comic books for $1, and plus you got the mystery factor. It's like it's always really exciting to think what that middle comic could be. Now, what's happening on the retailer side of these things, and these things are called, politely known as, they're called either multi-packs or blind boxes, but the idea is that at least part of what you're buying, you don't know what it is. These things, you see them at comic shows all the time. It's a very popular way to sell these things, and you can take them in a number of different ways, which range from either fun, good fun, in that we actually kind of nostalgically remember a lot of these ones. The ones where, like, let's say they were 40-cent comic books, but you're going to give me 3 for $1. And I don't know what the third one is, but I'm pretty sure these first 2 are pretty good. I might already have that one, but the one in the back I haven't read yet, and in the middle one, it could be anything. It was actually kind of exciting, and you feel like you got your money for the for the risk you took. You could get duplicates. It could be the middle comic book. You never had a question. The grade could have been all over the place. What these things really were is they were the scraps left over from the distribution channel that they'd been returned. They didn't sell. They didn't whatever else, and they'd try to throw a couple good things into the mix so that because they knew that if this was a copy of something that someone had ever heard of, and you could put that facing out, it was going to move a little better than if you stuck the world's most obscure Charlton horror comic on the inside. That one wasn't going to sell nearly as well as a multi-pack. So you try to make it so that the comics books you were at least looking at were at least kind of mainstream. And these things live on to this day. You can go down to Ollie's Discount Warehouse and buy a bag of 5 comic books for $10, or 10 comic books for $5, or whatever the thing is. But it's all some version of the blind box. Now, the blind box in this case is not entirely blind. In the case of multi-packs, you're looking at least part of the comic books. So, and sometimes they'll give you a little bit of a clue. Like if you go down to Ollie's Discount Warehouse, they'll say independent comics, and they'll price them out at 10 for $10. If it's Marvel comics, maybe it's 5 for $10 or something like that. Because the thought being that they're a little bit easier to move, and it could be anything. And sometimes you feel like throwing the money away. Sometimes you don't. You're never really gonna strike it rich on these things, but there's always that kind of gambler's urge. It makes it feel like maybe it's a thing. Well, you don't need necessarily to show the person anything, right? We have maybe all been to places where you don't actually show them anything of what's in the box. Right. You guys have all seen mystery boxes that you can buy at comic conventions. Sometimes your local comic store will have them, where it's a box where they'll say, okay, it's 3 graphic novels, total retail value at least $40, yours for the low, low price of $15 or $20. And you sit there and say, well, hey, how could I go wrong? And the answer, of course, how you can go wrong is that graphic novels tend to have quite a high cover price, but as remainder stock is like the ones that you can't sell, especially there's no guarantee of condition on these things. So they could be shot to hell. It could have been the one that, that they ran over with their truck, spilled their drink on, whatever else. You don't know, because you're not getting a chance to look in the box until you've bought it. And of course, there's no takebacks, no gimmies, whatever else. It's pretty easy to get a retail value that's quite up there. But as remainder stock, the real value of all these things tends to be like a tiny, tiny fraction. Matter of fact, you can actually buy remaindered, well, pretty much anything, whether books, DVDs, T-shirts, whatever the thing is. And if I'm just selling it to you blindly, you ought to be thinking, in your head, you're kind of guesstimating what percentage you should pay for anything where you can't know anything other than the broad category it is. Think about a number like 20% ought to be the number that, when they say like it's worth $100 retail, think, okay, is this even worth $20 to me? And then at that point, if it's kind of like 50-50, I'd pay $20. Do not buy it for $20. Buy it for $10 at that point. But don't be, there's a trick. There's a lot of psychological tricks. Now, we'll get into some of them right now. One of the biggest psychological tricks you can ever give someone, it's a thing called an anchoring price. And that is, if I can compare, as humans, we suck at knowing what anything should cost. I mean, you might think, well, yeah, I'm a very savvy shopper. What the hell are you talking about, Bickford? But I mean, what happens is we're really, really, really good at knowing relatively what something should cost. And we're really, really shit at knowing what things should cost in the abstract. So, for instance, if I'm going to tell you, I've got I don't know, I'm looking for an object on my desk. Okay, so I've got a can of a soft drink beverage here. So depending, on where I'm at, if I'm at an amusement park, that thing is a $4.50 can of soda. In a grocery store, it better not be more than a 50-cent can of soda, or I'm getting really pissed. So I mean, I've got literally almost 1,000% range I'm willing to pay for this can of soda, depending on time, circumstances, whatever else. Similarly, if you just give me an option to buy like just a thingy, like a pillow, like what's a thing that we don't buy very often? A pillow. What does a pillow cost? And I'm thinking, I don't know, got a bunch of them. 10, 20. And some guy says, no, this is a great pillow. This is $150 pillow. This is a life-changing pillow. And you're like, wow, life-changing pillow. Well, maybe it is worth $150. The point is, you don't know. And you're willing, if someone tells you a story, to believe almost anything to frame it up. With that said, if you know that the life-changing pillow for $150 is this much, but the life-changing pillow in purple is $10 more, you'll sweat him to death about saying, well, I wanted it in purple. I don't want to pay the extra $10. You're not worried about the fact that you were thinking a pillow cost $10 a minute ago. In your head, you're already thinking $150, but you're not paying the $160 to get it in purple. No. Because at that point, you've got an anchor. You've got something to compare it against. And we're really precise about knowing what something should cost in comparison to a similar thing of the same grade. But again, the whole point is we don't know what it should cost in the abstract. So one of the ways that we can, as a marketer or someone selling anything, that we can completely screw with you is to take something that you are really, really bad at guessing what it should cost, just in the general, and assign it a price that you don't really have a good sense as to whether this is a valid price or not. For instance, let's say we'll go back to our Wonder Pillow, right? It's like, yes, this Wonder Pillow, the life-changing pillow, compare at $300. And I'm sitting there going, I've never seen a $300 pillow, but I don't know. I guess there must be some luxury boutique where pillows are $300. But the whole point is, you've never met that boutique. You don't really know. The whole point is that the number 300 is now kicking around in your head. And so now they say, hey, but I can get you the life-changing pillow for only $150. Your head, because we're kind of dumb, does this quick little math, and it says, well, $300 versus $150, I've been getting it 50% off. I mean, this sounds like a steal all of a sudden. It's because the anchoring price, just literally by mentioning a number right before I tell you, what the price costs for you, suddenly you're comparing it to, it seems like a great deal just because I put the number out there. And you can apply this to literally anything. You can apply this to court negotiations. You can apply this to, anything. You don't need, if I spill hot coffee on myself in McDonald's, or whatever else, literally the reason that someone walked off with hundreds of thousands of dollars on that one is because they said, well, a lifetime of misery. What's that worth? And look at this company. You know, by the way, do you know how much money McDonald's made last year? And then they listed a very, very big number. And so you're sitting there saying, well, McDonald's Corporation made $30 billion last year. And now look at my defendant. The poor little person will be in pain for the rest of the day. And then suddenly, what the jurors are all thinking is 30 billion is a lot of money. Me giving her $18 million or whatever the hell it was stupid, whatever it was, that seems like a much smaller number. And in my head, it all kind of makes sense because I'm thinking 30 billion, you know. And so just by putting the number out there, it works. They've done this experiment with literally assigning students in psychology classes. They said, okay, the last 3 digits of your student number, you know, which you would think would be a relatively random set, you know. Okay, you're going to negotiate for the price of a thingy, a can of Orange Crush, whatever else, and we're going to break you off into groups, and your starting price is going to be the last 3 digits of your student number. And they would go then later on and they'd say, okay, so at the end of the day, what price did you guys arrive at when you bought the thingy? And the people whose starting number, you know, last 3 digits of their student ID were a low number, they obviously got much less price for the thingy than the people whose student IDs were 987. You know, if your student ID it was 123, you know, you wound up, you know, negotiating the price of your can of Diet Coke or whatever it was. You know, you got a number that was much lower than the guys whose starting ID number was 987. And everyone, including the teacher, including the students, knows it's an arbitrary number. You're telling them that as they do the negotiation, and you still can repeat the effect. And it's one of the more repeatable effects in all of psychology. So anyway, that's kind of a fun thing that goes into this blind box thing is that let's say I'll sell you a completely random good. And I'm not even going to show you the good. It's in a box, right? And I'm going to say, but compare at. And I'm going to tell you the sort of thing it is. So, I mean, if it has to be at least the sort of thing I would ever consider buying. So if I'm selling, female, teen romances and something like that me as a red-blooded American male, I would never buy. I do not care what number you put on top of it. I will not be buying that blind box of teen romance novels. I guess unless you tell me that with a estimated value of up to average retail value of $1,000, if you sell that one to me for $2,000 for $20. I think at that point, my stupid thing saying, well, 1,000's much bigger than 20, that might even take over the fact that I don't want the good at any price. But in general, you try and sell people something that at least in the wildest edges of their imagination, they might want. And so at that point, you kind of give it a general description. You certainly never tell them what's inside. And then you give them a price to fixate on, which is not at all representative of the retail, the actual value to the customer. But what it has to be a number that is high. And get them to fixate on that. And at that point, then you can sell your blind box for quite a bit of money. And the game works again and again. You can do it. I've seen it done with graphic novels where you put them all in a shipping box. You seal up the shipping box. You just get you literally, I've seen people, they went down to the post office. They bought a whole bunch of first-class mailers. They stuck a whole bunch of graphic novels that have been remaindered in the back of the store forever and the whole thing. They filled up the shipping box until they at least could laughingly say, hey, I gave you $40 worth of stuff, kid. And you could look at it and compare all the cover prices, and it would add up to $40. To the retailer, it was worth $0, or it was worth like $1 a pound, that kind of numbers. But they would sell these things for $24, $25, promising that you were getting $40 or $50 worth of value on the whole thing. And people get into the whole thing, and as long as they opened up the box and they felt like, okay, I kind of got something, and I can kind of see how you got there as far as, calling it that thing, they don't actually leave too unhappy about the whole thing. Excuse me, just 1 minute. I want to move a thing over to another screen so I can show you this particular thing. Okay, there's my mouse. Come on over. We can do this. All right. Okay, I've got this exactly where I want it. Okay. And this brings us to today's real topic, which of course is the infamous Bry's Comics Trading Pack Blind Box comic books. Yes, this is a thing the world has now done. And let me find the right screen to stick this on for you folks. And there we go. what they have done. And this is something that it's funny because I don't travel in this world much. And the funny part about this whole thing is I thought Bry was breaking new ground this whole thing. It turns out he's actually not. He's actually, when you get into it, he has a video he recorded, and he's actually a little bit jealous of the fact that a company called Whatnot, which is a multi-million-dollar backed company, with I mean, just hundreds of millions. I think I heard something about their VC funding was well into the six figures of millions. I'm sorry, like $100 million. That range of funding, as far as their startup. They've been essentially selling blind boxes and collectibles like this in their own packs, and been quite successful at it. And it looks like a guy named Bry's Comics. Don't know the guy, whatever else. And he decided, it's my turn, baby. We're getting in on this one. And this is more or less what he has to offer. I guess you're interested about this, you can go to bryscomics.com and read all about it. I guess he has a YouTube channel. I just watched his video on this one because I wanted to be sure. But he has a rather interesting little take on this whole deal. What he's going to do is, all right, we're going to sell 5,000 packs worth of comic books. Now you say pack of comic books. Well, okay, so what these things are is these are in a sealer. So in other words, he's actually gotten a little bag, and then you heat seal down the end there, so you can't tell what's inside. Now we are taking no chances with you peering at the corner of these suckers. And honestly, you're buying the mail order for the most part, so you don't get to manipulate them anyway. I mean, if I'm sure he'll try to sell them in his store and at shows and things like that. But I imagine that there's no real way of telling what's inside until you try. Now he's showing you pictures of very expensive comic books on the whole thing. Remember what I said about anchoring price, because that's going to come in very important here in a bit. And the one he really wants you to focus on this one is the idea of a $14,000 Amazing Fantasy in 1.0 condition. Now, think about that, guys. A 1.0 condition comic book is one that if you took it out of its plastic bag would be falling apart in your hands. It is the worst conceivable copy. Well, I mean, I guess there's 0.5s, but it's just about the worst conceivable copy of Amazing Fantasy you will ever behold. But anyway, but retail value of $14,000, and based on auction reels, I may have actually located this exact copy of Amazing Fantasy, which sold a year or two ago for $11,000. So I'm not going to call him out on that price at this point, because I think the one thing that's really interesting about this whole play is it works whether he's telling you the truth or not. And we'll get into some of the more scary aspects of that one in a bit. So anyway, so what he's doing here is he's promising you 3 comics in this pack of his. You buy this pack for $1,000. I'm sorry, for $1,500. What am I saying? Sorry, I'm looking at too many numbers, people. Sorry about that. You buy these comic packs for $64.99. Unclear. I'm assuming that there's also shipping involved, but let's assume he's not raping on the shipping. He's just charging what it actually costs to ship. So for $64.99, you are guaranteed to get access to 3 comic books. Now, the 3 comic books you're going to get, now he wants you to think about that Amazing Fantasy, that Amazing Fantasy right now. But the 3 comic books you're getting are custom store variants. And let's look at what these all are here. And unfortunately, this is as big as I can make it. But what he did is he took Marvel, they're launching #1s all the time, and he said, okay, look, I'm going to commission store variants of 5 normal Marvel comic books. Red Hulk #1, One World Under Doom #1, Deadpool Wolverine #1, New Champions #1, blah, blah, blah. There's a few others. And I'm going to commission, my own variant, and it's going to come with a trade dress variant. There's 1,500 copies of those. It's going to come with a Virgin variant. There's 1,000 copies of those of each one. And there's a color splash variant. There's a black and white variant. And then there's another one that he calls the Midnight variant. The Midnight variant is the one, I guess it's just dark toned. Instead of, you took one plate that was like the magenta plate and you made it black instead or something. Just a color swap out on something. And then the other ones, literally, if you know the printing aspect of the whole thing, it's actually really, really sad. I mean, in a way, when I was going over the play on this one and breaking it down, the person I found myself feeling the worst for out of this whole thing, other than possibly the end user. It was actually Bry himself, because I don't, in a way, he's trying to grift, but he's not trying to grift hard enough, and all the people he's working around are actually grifting him pretty damn badly. So start with grifter number one in this process is Marvel Comics themselves, because think about what they've done. You've taken comic content you've already paid for, right? You've already got Red Hulk number one. You've paid the artist, you've paid the writers, you've paid whatever royalties you've got to do, you've amortized the printing place. I mean, you've done all the things, and so for you to roll off the next incremental copy of Red Hulk number one costs you relatively less. So I mean, but what they do is they say, all right, look, we have a stable of artists, who do us covers, right? The cover guys are going to charge us between $300 and $500 to do the cover, your special cover for you, and we'll call it it's the Bry's Comics variant of Red Hulk number one. So we're going to pay Inyuk Lee. We'll get a check for $500 for us, and then we will pay another $125 for a set of new digital printing plates to print that cover. And the only thing we have to print is the cover. Right, we don't have to print the contents. We've already got those. We just had to overrun on those. We just have to print, basically one sheet of paper front and back, and that's the new thing. We paid for one new piece of art, very, very minimal cost for us to do that one. The printing plates are very, very minimal. But wait, it gets worse, because the way that we're going to get 5 covers out of this one cover is we don't pay Inyuk Lee again. No, we do one cover where we hide the layer, which has what they call the trade dress on it, which is all the stuff on the front of the cover that tells you, what issue it was and how many, it's from Marvel Comics and all that stuff. Literally, that's going to be a Photoshop layer, Photoshop Illustrator. It'll be one of those two things. It'll be a layer in the file. Literally, someone's going to go to that one and hit the hide button on that layer, and then you see just the original cover laid out. You then image it to the print again, right? So maybe there's a $100 print cost for that one. Maybe there isn't, to print the plates again, right? We're certainly not paying the artist again. We're certainly not paying the internal guys again. All right, so that's the one. All right, now we do the midnight cover. Now the midnight cover, all we're doing is we're going to take one of the SEP colors, in this case, like the oranges, and we're going to dial it in, and we're going to dial it down to black or something like that. Ooh, now it's midnight, spooky, right? And now we hit print again. Maybe there's $100 worth of printing, plates involved. Maybe there isn't. Depends on my print process. Do it again. Now we're going to do the black and white cover. Gee, how do we do a black and white if we've already got the color negative? You go to Photoshop, you say image, color, grayscale, hit print. And at this point, you don't even pay for anything for the print, because you only have to print one plate. You only have to print the black plate. And then you do it one more time. And that's the color splash page. Because what you do is you take a color, usually it's like blood or something like that, and you just say, I'm going to print one color. I'll print the red, the yellow, the cyan, whatever else, and I will print the black plus the color as a spot color. Sometimes you're really creative. You can make it like chromium, and you print the chromium plate. But that's basically, I'm gonna image 2 printing plates, black and whatever my spot color is, and I'll print that again. That cost me maybe $40 in print cost. So Marvel total production cost to give this guy 5 variants is maybe $1,000 in additional cost, maybe. Tops, absolutely the most you will ever pay to get these 5 variants printed on this thing. And then you just roll the presses, you got the paper costs and the whole thing. Marvel will be charged, I don't know, something on the order of 80 cents a comic book in order to actually roll these things up, bind them, and ship them to the guy. And for this whole thing, Bry is going to be paying considerably more, as we will get into. But let's go into the pitch. All right, so and let's see here. Let me make sure that I've got the right thing on the screen right now, because I've been on me. Okay, so let's go into the pitch. So here is the deal. So there are going to be 5,000 of these packs made. They contain a total of 3 comics. One of them is going to be a trade dress comic book. It's going to be basically a 1,500 circulation comic book. Approximate value on the street, let's be generous, $8 to $10. Let's call it 10, right? He's going to give you the midnight one. That's going to be a 300 circulation comic book. I'm sorry, there's going to be the version one. That one is going to be, again, the same thing with less the trade dress. Let's call that one $15, right? We're using like eBay numbers for the whole thing. And this again, let's forget the fact that this is just a store variant, right? So it's a little bit vanity pressy on the whole thing. But okay, let's just say in general, maybe I can get $15 for that one. Then I'm going to do the midnight one and maybe get $18 for that one. And then then we get into the actual kind of rare ones. So the midnight one was 300 printed on the whole thing, and then you get to the ones that it's only 175 printed. Let's say you get $40 for that one. That's going to be your black and white one. And then let's say you get couple $100 even for the 1 in 25 variant. It's the black and white one with the color splash. Let's maybe even get $400 for it. Let's just be as crazy as everyone. That's what you're looking at now. For this whole thing, you might be looking at it and saying, I don't know, man. I don't know if that's enough to get my interest. Well, he says, no, I've got you covered. What we're going to do in this case is we're going to throw in what we call in the trades salting, right? So salting is when you, again, want to, let me slow down just a bit here. Let me switch over to the other camera. So at this point, it might be occurring to you that he wants $65 for, let's see, a $10 comic book, a $15 comic book, and maybe on average like a $20 comic book. So I add those things together, and I'm sitting there thinking that's not super compelling for me, especially because I don't even know which of the comic books I'm getting. I don't know if I like them. It's just a store variant. This is not super sexy. If you tried to sell me those comic books individually on eBay, I probably would not buy them, right? It's a little sexy because they get the mystery aspect of the whole thing. But if I'm just sort of like mentally calculating what would I pay, for those 3 comic books, I'm coming up with a number like $45 total is what the whole thing's worth in my head. And I'm thinking, you're not going to sell it to me for $65. So he does a really smart thing here. And this is what's known in scamcraft is salting. So let's say I want to convince you to buy my diamond mine. And you sit there and say, well, diamonds are very hard to mine for, and yes, we realize it's a risky activity, and all the priors, pertain and so forth. But honestly, I want you to inspect the site yourself. You can walk down into the mine. You can go there even when I'm not even there if you want. Look around if you want, and then afterwards you can see. Like I think this mine will be worth a lot of money, but look for yourself, and then you tell me. And what you do, and so you sit there and say, wow, I'm being very open and generous as a seller of the whole thing. He, as a savvy man of industry, is looking at my potential diamond mine I'm selling, or a gold mine, or a copper mine, or whatever the heck the thing is, and is sitting there thinking, well, I know the risks involved, but if it does pay off, if it's got a rich vein in there, I could really make a lot of money. And you're willing to let him run around the mine without you even there. Just take your men, go and inspect it at your leisure. Now, what the guy selling the mine knows that the guy buying the mine doesn't know is the guy selling the mine has not been able to get a diamond or gold or copper out of that damn thing for ages. But what he has done is he's gone out and bought a whole bunch of industrial grade diamonds. Yeah, let's keep it as a diamond mine right now. And what he does is you do what's called salting. You basically take a whole bunch of these little tiny industrial grade diamonds and you sort of fling them about on top of the dirt in different places. Try to make it look, like, oh no, there's a little something outside. What is that glistening under that pile there? Oh my goodness, it's a mine. It's so close to the surface. What were the chances? And what's going to happen is the guy's going to sit there and say, wow, this thing must be really worth some money because look, I could see something of value just right there. Now, this little industrial diamond I pick up isn't worth much, but man, I'll bet you if I dug a little harder, there'd be something that's even better. And this is what a dumb guy would do. I mean, it's an old scam, and it's done famously with things like mining, where you can sell, if you want to sell your dry oil well, you have people go and do industrial spill off on it, a month before you start shopping around for investors, so that when they, start digging around for stuff, they get down 4 feet under the surface, and suddenly their shovels are going to come up, with goo on it. And it's like they're thinking, hey, but the same thing goes for anything else, and it goes for collectibles like comic books as well. So if I'm going to sell you thousands and thousands of copies of what basically is Drek, it's just another variant. It's just another thingy. Honestly, you're not going to get me that excited. How much am I really excited about getting another store variant of Red Hulk #1? Not so much. But if I salt the stash right, with a tiny number of very high profile books, and especially if I do things that, again, you exploit that kind of anchoring concept of, of saying it's an amazing fantasy number 14, number 15, and I'm thinking first Spider-Man, and I remember first Spider-Man, that thing went for like a couple $1 million recently. You say, and you notice it's like, well, this is only a 1.0 copy, but you're still thinking, well, still pretty cool. Your head is only partially come back from the idea that this is a $2 million comic book in the rough, but now you're thinking, hey, I'm focused now on the $14,000. Now you've got me focused on that one. $14,000 Amazing Fantasy number 15. And I'll say, yeah, there's going to be 20 golden tickets scattered throughout the packs randomly. I won't know who they are. No one will know who they are. It's completely random. But if you have one of the golden tickets, one of two things is going to happen. Now, half the golden tickets are for $500 in store credit on my online store. Now, I'm thinking, $500, that sounds pretty good, but you're also thinking, used bookstore stuff, maybe I want something, maybe I don't. And a smart person, when you talk about store credit at a bookstore, and frankly, it's what the guy selling the books is thinking. This thing is worth about half. So $500 in store credit, it's worth effectively about $250 really. And that's assuming you're interested, right? There's a fair number of people who get store credit at a bookstore who will never redeem at all or never redeem much. And if they do, they're getting something they didn't really want because they need to burn the card, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also have the idea that, like, in general, people buying, selling you store credit, their cost isn't the $500. Their cost is the cost of the goods required to fill that $500, which, if you're a decent bookstore owner or whatever else, you're not buying the thing for anything less than half, right? So your real cost on those goods is, like, call it $250 a piece, right? In terms of the actual cost, worst case. All right, but that leaves 10 golden tickets out there. One of my 10 golden tickets getting now. I got one that's for a $14,000 comic book. Remember, $14,000. And the next one's good for a $7,500 comic book, and the next one's good for like a $4,500 comic book, and the one after that's good for like a $3,500 comic book, and it goes down to like about $2,400 comic book. All of which, let's face it, safe to say, he didn't pay no $2,400 for the $2,400 comic book, but let's say he did. I mean, let's go worst case on the whole thing, and let's say Bry is as honest as the day is long, and he just wants this whole thing to be fun. Let's say he paid full rack rate for every single thing he's asking about. At which point, what he's done is he's taken some salt. He's taken some books that are legitimately interesting and legitimately valuable, and far, far more valuable than the $64.99 he's asking you for, and he's scattering them through the collection. Now, you know that there's only 20 golden tickets, and you know only 10 of them are real. And this is where your brain once again screws you. Because the human brain, not only are we rubbish at figuring out price, again, we're really good at relative price, we're really terrible at absolute price. Never forget this. Honestly, it's the most important tip I can ever give you if you're going to do marketing, is to realize that in your brain. But the other thing about it is, and sorry, I want to get the chat back on screen here because I've been talking so long. But the other thing about it is, we are terrible at distinguishing large numbers from each other. Penn and Teller, the magicians, famously, if you ever see their thing on recycling, they do it they had a show called Bullshit. And they did a thing on recycling. And what it really came down to is that the human brain, we're adapted from way back when, and the way we make decisions about things is based on small numbers for the most part. In other words, we know the difference, like if we know the difference between, like, let's say I have a jelly bean or I have an M&M, and there's two M&Ms, okay, two M&Ms, and then you got like a handful of M&Ms. I got 5 or 10 M&Ms, okay, and then you put like 100 M&Ms in there, and then after that, like after you talk like about 100 M&Ms. At that point, the brain just kind of goes, it's a whole crap ton after that. It's a whole crap ton feels the same to us as the difference between 1 and 2 feels like a lot. The difference between 5 and 10, it feels like about the same mental distance in our head as between 1 and 2, even though it's 5 times more, right? And the difference when you get to big numbers, it's just that we've already kind of hit it's a whole crap ton. We can't really feel the difference anymore. So when you talk about you have a 1 in 10 chance of something, it feels like, well, okay, let me think about that. I'm picturing myself in a room with 9 other people. I'm thinking, well, that's not particularly likely, but it could happen. Okay. All right, let's say I'm going to change that to, well, let's start with, let's say there's a 1 in 2 chance of you winning. All right, 1 in 2. Hey, 50-50, coin flip. I feel like I'm pretty good. All right, I changed to a 1 in 3. Well, still pretty good, but, I can kind of tell it's a little worse, but, I still feel like it could happen. Now I take that to 1 in 10. 1 in 10 doesn't feel a ton different than 1 in 3. It certainly doesn't feel a ton different than 1 in 5. But it gets really strange when I start asking you to do things like, all right, you have a 1 in 100 chance of winning. Now, how do we process that idea? We sit there and say, all right, 1 in 100, that's 1 penny on the dollar, that's where else? And you picture yourself in a room with 100 people, and you're thinking, well, it's probably not me, but it could happen, and that's about as far as you go. All right, let's say I make that 10 times worse. It's now 1 in 1,000. The logic your brain runs through to calculate 1 in 1,000 is you picture yourself in a slightly bigger room, and then it shortcuts directly to well, I guess it could happen, but probably won't, and then you sit there, well, what about 1 in 10,000? What about 1 in a million? And this is how we sell you lottery tickets, is because we sit there and say, look, there is a 1 in, I forget what it comes down to. It's something like a 1 in 343 million chance of you hitting all the numbers on Powerball. I think it's, no, sorry, 540. Someone in the chat will know the actual number of this one, but your chance of hitting all the numbers on Powerball are a number that is like 1 in several hundred million, right? And everyone internalizes that as there is almost no chance, but there's almost no chance. and the funny thing is, there's a point when it gets to be a pot that's a number like a billion, it starts to approach the point where it almost makes sense. And then when you actually work the problem in your head a little further, I've actually said this to like my kids at one point. When you work the problem a little further, you realize, no, even then it makes no sense. Let's say you have the largest lottery pot that has ever been given out, which I think has been in the excess of $2 billion. And so you sit there and say, oh my God, there's a 543 million chance. I mean, obviously, I should spend up to $4 in order to win that pot, right? Because, you just divide it out there. It's actually rational. I'm almost making money if I could buy enough lottery tickets. Except, as like with most things where the government's running it, no, not even a chance, because you never collect the 2 billion. If you actually took the settlement right away, I mean, the 2 billion, if let's say you'd won it, the amount that they would give you after taxes on the whole thing would have been a number somewhere around like 480 million or something if you took the lump sum one. Now, if you're not taking the lump sum, because they also take your taxes out of the whole thing, if you're not taking the lump sum on that one, then you're also paying for the present value of money. And you didn't buy your ticket with the present value of money. You bought your ticket in the right here and now. It isn't like I'll buy my ticket, I'll give you 10 cents this year and 10 cents next year and 10 cents the year after that. And that's not how you spent the money. You spent current value, value on the $2 you spent for that lottery ticket. And even with the biggest pots that the government has ever done, it might possibly, maybe, theoretically be a break even if you won in terms of the overall statistical chance. But anyway, let's see here. I want to check, has anyone picked out the Powerball odds in the chat yet? No, that's what I get for going by memory. So anyway, so what we've done here with, and it is very much the Powerball effect in this one. What we've done here with this particular blind box here is you've combined the gambler's thrill of, hey, I'm showing you a few things that are worth some money in the abstract, whether you want them or not, with the idea of something that's very high profile, that sounds very, very sexy, and you're putting in a price where you think, maybe, maybe it doesn't make sense. So it occurred to me, though, it might be fun to actually break down the actual numbers involved with this particular scheme. And this is where the quant period of our portion of our show comes in. So let me see if I can bounce over to my other computer here for a second. Here, I think, there we are, book number 1. Excellent. Let me pull this up. Oh, don't even. Oh, I don't want that. Do I not have Excel on this machine? I'm going to be so cross if I don't. All right. All right, going back to the other machine. Sorry about that, guys. We're bouncing over to the other machine. I'm opening up there, even though it'll be a little bit tweaky. All right, give me just a second. I will open Spreadsheet here. I knew there was something I was going to do beforehand that I did not do, and that apparently was installing Excel on the other machine. So let me go ahead and bring Excel over to the party. And I want to restore you. There we go. And I want to move you. Okay, there you are. Okay, so let's break down this little play here, shall we? And apologies to Brian. So, I mean, all right. I'm going to say it's, I'm going to put myself on the screen here for a minute just to kind of keep myself in the picture. I'm going to try not to step over the key numbers, but forgive me for a moment. I'm probably going to move myself off here. So I'm just going to kind of keep talking as we go. Oh, no, go to the right screen, you dummy. All right. Okay. This is the one I want right there. Okay, great. All right. So here's the play. And I'm actually going to say, when I first heard about this play, I was not particularly sympathetic to Bry. I don't know Bry personally. I have no history with him whatsoever. But I thought, this is a scam, and I don't like scams in general. I mean, I like magic tricks a lot, but I don't like scams. I thought this is a scam, and the poor guy, I'm thinking, got scammed worse than he's hoping to scam. But even then, let's run some numbers. And he was actually very charming, and I believe him when he said what some of the numbers were, when he talked about how many comics he had to buy at the different prices in order to do the store variants and whatnot. But let's run down the play with it, shall we? So he got 5 different comic books. And they all come in a trade dress cover. That's the one I have in bold here. A virgin cover, a midnight one, a black and white one, and a color splash one. They all came in with a cover price of $5.99 for the most part, $4.99 for some of them. But let's read some of the numbers in his favor right now. $5.99 each, and he had to buy 3,000 copies of the non-trade dress ones in order to be allowed to buy them. I guess I'm going to take myself off the screen here. Sorry. Okay. So Marvel, because he's not Whatnot, and you could tell he's bitter about this. Whatnot has such a big deal going on with Marvel. They clearly got much more favorable terms, and they're willing to give him a mere retailer. What they gave him is that, no, dude, you want your own cover? Fine, it's $3,000. You got to buy 3,000 copies of it, and at which point we'll assign one of our artists to you, and he got some artists that he likes, well enough, but he had a lot of requests for ones that they didn't give him. But basically Marvel has a bunch of people who will do them a cover for $500 or $300, and he got to choose amongst them for his own custom variant. So he had to buy, so for comic number 1, let's say it was Red Hulk number 1, he had the $5.99 cover, he had to buy 1,500 copies. He spent, let's say his discount on that, almost every retailer on the planet can score a 50% Marvel discount. Certainly he can. Maybe the discount is a little higher. So there's a discount. There's some assumptions in the spreadsheet on this one. I mean, if he was a very big retailer, he might have been able to order these things at 42% of cost instead of 50, at which point you'd see his numbers drop and so forth. But let's go ahead and put the numbers back. And let's assume he ordered it at just Joe Blow, I'm just a regular guy numbers, at which case, $6 comic book times $1,500 at a 50% discount. And now here's the part that is very galling for him. He had to actually, in order to get his retailer variant, had to buy 3,000 copies of this one and pulp 1,500 of them, from which he is actually promised that he hires a shredder that will provide him with a certificate of shredditude, that says that he is definitely going to, they're going to definitely destroy them. So he's actually, at the end of the day, going to only walk away with 1,500 of his comic books at a total cost of $8,985 for the trade dress version. They allow you, again, over the assumptions over here, for the virgin covers, they allow you to buy them for as little as $1,000. Oh, how nice of them. Being that the trade dress one, they've already amortized the art cost here, right? That's the one where they actually had to pay for the artist. Here, they just hid the Photoshop layer and maybe paid $100, for plate costs. So yes, I mean, again, who got screwed here? The first person who got screwed was Bry. Anyway, so they made him order 1,000 copies of the virgin cover, which not coincidentally is how many that he's putting in, in the mix. He's using all 1,000 of those, but then he had to buy 1,000 of the ones for the midnight ones. Oops, sorry, and I take this back. I gotta update these ones. I could tell that my spreadsheet didn't update properly when I changed one line of assumptions here, because give me just a second here. I need to copy and paste some lines. This is the joy of spreadsheets, by the way. I mean, I absolutely adore that you can come up with basic assumptions, and then when you roll them down here, everything just updates, and it's just beautiful. I'd originally assumed until moments before showtime that he was probably going to be able to get away with a 500 order on the color drop variants, but according to him on his thing, that no, they made him pay for 1,000. So he has a whole bunch of waste comic books when you're going for the midnight ones, the black and whites and the color splashes and so forth. So to get the color splashes, and technically he's keeping 26 because he's keeping one for himself. He had to burn 975 comics in order to get 25 that he would keep. But then that gives him the uber rare, only 25 circulation ones over there. Now, again, think about it. Marvel just sold 1,000 comic books to this guy that they did not want, times a whole bunch of variants in order to make him do the stuff. But so it gives you an idea of what his outlay on the whole process looked like. So let me share everything out there. So, all right. And furthermore, he made some comment that he had packaging costs involved. He had devised, this is a big deal for Bry. So he devised his own sealed on 3 sides, heat sealable thing. He's going to be doing all the heat sealing himself, which is that's the way a comic guy would think. He's paying for custom certificate of authenticities with these things with serialized numbers, limited to X number may. He's probably paid Marvel a whole bunch of shipping to get the stuff sent to him. I might have, the shipping might have been $0. It might have been as high as $600. So I'm probably not super far off on these numbers, I don't think. He's paying to shred a whole bunch of stuff. Let's say he paid $500 for that, and let's give him $1,000 advertising budget. He's doing this on the internet, but let's say he takes out some ads somewhere to give himself some feedback. So he's charging. So what's his total layout for this whole thing? Well, okay. Now he's paying, and let's assume that he's doing on this one, basically the full list value. So if I'm assuming the salt, the extras he threw into the mix on this one, let's assume that the store credit he's giving at 50% of the face cost. So in other words, it costs him $250 each to provide that service. And let's assume he bought all the comic books at the stated retail value, which I think is very generous. I think it's quite possible that the actual cost that he paid for incentives and salt is something like $20,000 less than this number here. But let's assume he threw 53 grand in salt into the mix. So that gives him a total outlay of $164,000 for this whole play. All right, well, let's look at Bry's upside, shall we? All right, and that's the part of the spreadsheet. And again, I love this stuff. So let's let me make some of these columns just a little bit bigger. So let's work out the numbers. So when you add all these numbers together and you figure out how many comics he's promising 3 to the pack, you're going up with 5,000. You got 15,000 comics total. That's going to make 5,000 packs out of the whole thing. And you're selling them at $64.99 per pack. So what's that worth you? That's worth $324,950, which gives you a profit of $160,000, which is basically you're doubling your money, right? So you're betting $164,000 on the whole thing. He mentions that this whole play cost him is more than he spent to put the down payment on his house. I believe him on this one. And let's just, at this point, let's look at the profit and loss on the whole thing. So yeah, he's gonna double his money, the whole thing. But what about you, my friend? What about you, the buyer? What do you get out of it? So is this a good deal or is this not a good deal? Well, it turns out it's actually possible to work the numbers and to put some numbers to this. And it goes like this. What's the actual value in the pack? Well, he guarantees that every pack will have 3 comic books. One of them, for damn sure, will be a regular one. It'll be the trade dress one. And let's be generous. Let's say that one's worth $10, which is being generous. The reality, $6, $8, 10 on the upside. But let's give him 10. All right. He also promised you that there's going to be a virgin one, which and again, let's assume the virgin one is worth there's a 1,000 print run on this one. Let's be as generous as hell on the whole thing, and let's assume these ones are worth $15. Again, the reality, if I were buying them, I'd say 6 and 8, 6 and 10 might be closer to what I would pay, but hey, let's give him his full 15. We're going full eBay pricing on this one. All right, so now the question all comes down to what's that third comic book worth? Because he's asking you to pay $64.99, but he's only giving you $25 worth of value for it so far. So what is that third comic book worth? And this is where this gets to be kind of a fun little math problem. And you have to think of it like this. All right, how many comic books are left? He's used 10,000 of the 15,000 comic books in order to give you the first 2 comic books, right? So out of the third one, there are 5,000 comic books left to fulfill the order. So that's what the third comic book is. That's the pool it comes from. All right. Now, what are the comic books that Bry has left over? Well, 2,500 of them are the trade dress, right? And those ones, let's scroll it like this. I think this is okay for now. So there's a 1 in 2 chance that your third comic book is going to be another trade dress comic, right? There is about a 1 in 3 chance that your third comic book is going to be one of the 1 in 300s. There's 1,500 of those kicking around. And and we'll talk about how much those are worth. There is a 175 kicking around. There's 875 left that are the 1 in 175. Those are I believe, the black and white ones. And there are 125 comic books left that are the 1 in, the only 25 circulation. Those are the black and white with the color splash ones. And so those are your odds. And let's look at the percentage of the total that those represent. If I can scroll this ever so closely. So that's what that looks like. Oh, and let's also put some numbers to what we think these things might be worth. All right. So, and again, I'm putting these values here based on, experience and things like that. But you could put fairly radically different values. I mean, let's say I want to say the 1 in 25. Let's say I want to say it's 250. It turns out it doesn't change the numbers much, but I'll go ahead and do it. But here's your percentage of total. So you have a 50% chance. So 0.5, here, let me show this in percentage. Sorry, view format, percentage. And we will want at least 2 decimal places. Great. Okay. You have a 50% chance that your third book is just another trade dress. You have a 30% chance that your last book is a 1 in 3, one of those 300 circulation ones. You have a 17.5% chance that's one of the 175s, and you have a 2.5% chance that it's one of the total 25 circulation. Now, but wait, you say we've left out the 20 golden tickets, right? And you'll notice that these ones they're fudged a little bit. There's 10 packs missing out of the bunch. I'm assuming that he's going to pull a few packs in these whole things to, for his own, but he's somehow going to work those into the mix. So there are basically 20 comic books in the mix unaccounted for, but they don't affect anything worth a darn. There is a sorry, let me go ahead and format this one the same way. Percentage. Over here. Percentage. Excel. There is a 0.2% chance, 0.2, a 1 in 500 chance that you will get a golden ticket. But that's a golden ticket for the store credit. There's a 1 in 500 chance that you will get a golden ticket for one of the comic books. Now, and of those comic books, the average value of those is about $4,500. So the golden ticket is worth about an average of $250. So it turns out you can actually evaluate what that third book is worth to you. And the way you evaluate what that third book is worth to you. So we know the regular one's worth about 10. We know the version's worth about 15. And the value you should put on that third book consists of its value times its percentage of the total. And you add your percentage of the total of getting this book, so 50%, 0.5 times $10 plus 0.3 times 18 plus 0.175 times 40 plus 0.25 times 150 plus 0.02. I think I might just 0.02. Sorry. 0.02. That's what I meant to say. Times 250 and 0.02 times 450, 4,500. And that if you add all those together, is what that third comic book is worth. And if you add all those together, you get this number. The value of that third comic book is worth $30.65 using the most optimistic assumptions of value, using, again, full retail value for all the comic books. Nothing is hinky. Everything's on the level. You're good to go. So your total value on average of your $69.95 investment is $64.95 investment is $55.65, giving you a net loss on average of $9.34. So you could say, but wait, it could happen. There's a 1 in point aught. I mean, it's 1 out of 5,000, so I'm not very good at that one, but it's 0.02% chance, I believe, that I'm going to be the guy who gets the amazing fantasy that I will then realize is in 1.0 condition. Or maybe it's just really fun playing, or whatever the reasons. You may have your reasons for playing regardless of knowing the odds, but I'm going to say, give or take a very small percentage, that is my best estimate as to the breakdown of how this particular play pans out in terms of its financial projections. And I'm comforted somewhat by knowing that Bry is the numbers that I came up for totals very, very similar to the numbers that when I found his YouTube video, which went into it in some detail, very, very similar to the numbers that he gave. So Bry, if you're watching this, when you like give me any additional perspective on this, please by all means do. But I don't think there's anything you can tell me that's going to move it by more than a percentage one way or another in terms of how the ROI calculation on this one goes. So then we get down to the final category, or the final aspect of the whole thing, which is the sucker bet. So everything we've been talking about so far is we talked about how blind boxes work. I mean, how they're basically exploiting both the combination of a set point, of an anchoring price. The idea of like it's a $500 value and it's yours for much less, right? You exploit the fact that we're really pretty crap at calculating long odds. We tend not to do it very rigorously. And once you get from the idea of like it's kind of a mid to long shot to it's a very freaking long shot, most people don't factor that into their spending in a way that makes any financial sense. Like I say, the exact way you should be factoring in what a particular odd is you say, what's the odds of the outcome, and then what's the worth of the outcome, and then when you multiply those two factors together, that's what the chance should be worth for you. So if you have a 1 in a million chance of winning $1 million, right, then you should not be spending more than $1 for that chance. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. And again, when it's the government doing it, and they're going to take 50 to 60% of the money before you even see it, then you shouldn't be spending more than 40 cents. But anyway, that's how you should do it. Some people, I mean, and like I'm sympathetic to all the stuff when it's done for entertainment purposes. And we do go to magic shows to be shown things that are impossible. We see magicians create, they take a $5 bill from someone and presto change, it becomes a $100 bill. We see this stuff performed in front of our eyes. We know it can't possibly be true, but my goodness, it's fun thinking about, well, hey, we'd like to do that with the rest of my wallet. I mean, I'd be rich, right? I mean, it's fun thinking about it. It's just the difference with a magic show is, that the only price you're paying is what's, that you paid your vig when you bought the ticket at the door. I mean, I have not been to a magic show in a non-Western foreign country. I can certainly imagine, seeing a magician in the souk in Egypt, someplace where he doesn't just say, "Hey, can I borrow a $100 bill from someone here?" And then he just runs off with it. That could happen. It's not going to happen to an American magic show. The damages you paid were when you got your drink at halftime and when you paid for the ticket. But that's all you're out as a person in a magic show in terms of your risk. Now, but there's sometimes the grifters, and here I'm going to say Bry, I would put him down as an honest grifter on this one. He's got a business proposition. He's taking on some risk, not really a ton of risk unless it turns out that nobody wants his store variant. That is a real thing that could happen to him. but let's say he dresses it up enough and he manages to clear the whole thing. Bry's going to double his money. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. And frankly, there's a little bit of wiggle room on the end, because Bry also is going to be left with some very expensive comic books at the end of the day, which he then can sell for additional profit. We don't know what Bry paid for the initial comics he's salting the thing with, etc. So even if Bry plays it entirely on the level, he does everything like, like Lord himself is watching over him, making sure he doesn't cheat anything. Bry's going to double his money. Bry's going to do just fine. But at this point, you'd say he's an honest grifter. He's not there to entertain you. Not really. He's there to take your money, but he's using the kind of the gambler's thrill aspect and all the human tricks that we've talked about so far in order to get you to willingly part with, on average, basically $10 of lost value every time you buy one of his packs. That's on average how much you would lose. But let's say that someone who was not as ethical as Bry was not on the level, right? So, I mean, think about it. How do I really know that, the comic books he promised are in the mix, right? I mean, is there anyone there who's going to, ensure that those comic books got given up? How do I know that they didn't get, put in special packs that got sold to his friends who then hawked them on the back, even assuming they were? How do you know that, that the distribution was fair? I mean, how do you know when he's putting all the things together that the whole thing was there? The whole point is we're trusting Bry. Right. And I don't know Bry. So, I mean, it's like, would I trust, my local priest to do this stuff? And I'm thinking, to a point. But when the bingo fund gets very large, you want to have another couple people watching over it to make sure that nothing funny happens. And yes, all the above scams can apply even when you're being honest grifters. Now, remember, who grifted first? Marvel grifted first and hardest on this entire thing. Bry, thinking that he's going to double his money, paid a whole bunch of vig to the folks over at Marvel, and they again are walking away smelling like roses in this whole thing. Then they didn't have to go to any of the work that he did. Literally, Marvel went to virtually no work whatsoever. They made a couple calls to their staff cover guys, and it changed up a print order and a shipping manifest, and they walked away with tens of thousands of dollars in free money on this whole thing. This I mean, they are the biggest. I'd say if you want to pick a place to be in on the grift, that's the easiest way to go. Bry's trying to be an honest grifter on the whole thing. And let's assume he's being an honest grifter. He's not playing funny, that the shop funds aren't low this month and he has to, pull something off the back end. But let's face it, your ability to maintain that he's not pulling a grift is rather suspect. And honestly, everything he's doing is paling compared to what the more institutional level investors like Whatnot are doing, where they get to buy things at far bigger discounts and they get to sell them in far, and they're realizing, and you can tell it's a pained expression on Bry's face as he's showing, if you watch his video, where he's rolling over like what Whatnot has gotten for their different Chromium prize packs, which again were produced for $15 per, and they're selling for like $1,000 on Whatnot. So it's crazy, how much we can scam ourselves in this whole thing. And don't kid ourselves, we are all active participants in this particular scam. But I'd say one thing that you cannot excuse, no matter how you do it, is if you rig the game. And so this brings me finally to the idea of the Carnival Claw game. And so I did promise people I would tell you, how does the Carnival Claw game steal your money? So you guys all know the game. There's, a bunch of cool looking prizes at the bottom. At Comic-Con, they had Funko Pops from Game of Thrones, but I've seen everything from just you name it. But there's what happens is you have a joystick. It's a game of skill, or at least it appears to be a game of skill. You maneuver the prizes are all arranged in a glass cage, different edges sticking out. Everyone kind of susses out, say, well, this is an easy edge to grab. That's a hard one. I don't know if I trust this one. You've got a very imprecise joystick with a lot of wobble in it. And you put your money in, and then for a few seconds, you can steer the crane over the prize you want. When you think you got it right there, you push the button. You are now committed. The crane will drop. It will then retract, clamp around whatever it is that you've gotten. Hopefully you've lined it perfectly, and then we'll try to pull it out of the remaining set of prizes, pull it over to the deposit bin, and if everything works right, it opens up one more time, dropping your prize into a chute that gives it to you, and you walk around with your newest Homer Simpson doll or whatever the thing was, and you're an absolute hero to your nephew, right? That is how it allegedly works. Except it doesn't work that way at all. So all of us think it's a skill game, or at least everyone who hasn't gotten into the gist of it, they think it's a skill game. And there is some elements to the whole thing where, I mean, if you choose, I'm going to put the claw over something that's buried 6 miles underneath a whole bunch of other obstructing objects, and I try to get that one, you're not going to win that one no matter what. So give that one up. But let's say you go and you're fairly good with it, figuring out the 3 dimensions of the whole thing, and you've got it lined up right, and that part of the whole thing is level, and you push the whole thing down. What normally happens is this. Let me take something like, okay, I'm grabbing a remote control. I've got my claw, and I got it lined up, and I drop it, and boom, and it goes, and it grabs around the whole thing. And what I expect to have happen is that it then goes and lifts the whole thing, drops it over at the prize bin, and drops like that. Except that's not what happens at all. No, what happens is I drop it, and most of the time it goes like that, and it kind of loose hands it, and oh, damn it, it slipped because this thing just didn't have enough of a grip on the toy. Ah, darn, so sad, try again. That's at least what we think's happening. And every once in a while, we're watching somebody else, and we see that they've got, that they did it just like that, and they did just the way I said, and they dropped down the whole thing, and boom, they got the Homer Simpson doll, and then it's like, how'd that jerk get it and I didn't? Well, it turns out there have been people that have pulled apart crane machine games where you can buy them. I mean, you can, if you wanted to have one for your office, you could buy them, and they come with a manual. And the manual almost universally comes with a little calculator on the back, and it says, okay, how much would you like to make? It literally is just that. How much would you like this thing to pay you out? Okay, all right. What's the average value of the prizes you've got in here? Okay, how much do you want to charge? Okay, and then you just say, how much would you like to make? And then what it does is it divides the value of the prize, by how much money is coming in, and it decides what the percentage of time it is that it will supply either full power to the crane, at which point it will drop down, grab like the hand of God, pull the thing up, yank it, and drag it over to the bin, and the other percentage of the time, and it is just a percentage, and you can measure it with a multimeter. It will put in just enough juice into the solenoid. It goes from like a 1 amp grab, which is a very firm thing. It goes from like a 1 amp down the line to like 0.04 amps. It's just enough to make it so you can see that the claw moved. It's like as if you took all the strength out of your fingers and just let it flop around. And at that point, if you are in the 75-80% of the time where it was never going to give you the full strength of the amperage down the line, the only way you're getting that Homer Simpson doll or whatever that thing is if somehow in the dragging, it just happened to hook onto something in such a way that even with no strength in the hand whatsoever, it still somehow is stuck and it manages to drop on. That is the only way you're ever going to win. And it's a beautiful grift. And it's a beautiful grift because it's absolutely invisible. We can't see the electrical current. And it either supplies it or it doesn't supply it. And the only way you can see that it's doing it or not doing it is if you literally had the back of the machine open and you had you had a probe on the circuit, and you were basically going to be able to see, and you'd know ahead of time. You don't even need to go through the motions. Is if it's running full power to the whole thing, you've got a chance. If it's not running full power to the whole thing, you have no chance. And it's just a grift. There are similar games. If you guys have been to the arcades, you might have seen the one where it's a circle with lights all around the circle, little flashing bulbs. And there's a little zone of the flashing bulbs where if you can push the button right as the stream of lights that's rolling around the circle gets right in between the 2 guard posts of that zone. So if you push the button at any other time, you get like a couple of tickets, right? If you push it when it's right in the zone, you get like 500 tickets. And so I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is a great game. I finally found a carnival game I can win because I'm a drummer. I have great time. And so all I have to do is, as I'm watching this thing go and hit the zone, all I got to do is start thinking about the beat. And so I'm thinking every time it gets to the zone part, I'm going to hit the microphone. And I start thinking, doom, 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 doom. At that point, I could practically close my eyes because I can keep that thing to within 1 beat per minute, very, very simply, because I'm just going do, 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 do. Next time it goes around, I just hit boom at exactly the right time, and I should be getting 500 tickets like clockwork. Except I don't. And as a matter of fact, there's a guy named Mark Rober. He's a guy who worked on the Mars lander for NASA. He has a very popular YouTube channel. He's a NASA engineer, like a legit rocket scientist. And one of the things he decided to do one day is take apart this damn carnival game and find out how it was ripping him off, because he saw the same thing I did. Is like, no, I'm pretty sure this thing it's not legit. I'm hitting this thing exactly when I should, but it always registers like a little bit early or a little bit late, just a touch, just enough so I think that if I try it again, I'll probably get it. But you'll always be a little off. And he actually designed a robot that he stuck inside a backpack with a little light meter, so it could actually gauge when the lights were hitting exactly right there, and with electronic efficiency stamp a solenoid down on the button, which he placed right on top of the thing, and hit the ticket. And again, this thing is measuring this thing at machine speeds. And again, this is not a wimpy guy. This is Mark frickin' Rober from NASA. And he puts the thing down, and he gets the same results I do with his robot. He's getting nowhere. And so he's sitting there, well, hell with that. And he actually gets out cameras and measures the signal traces of the photons of the whole thing. He's trying to figure out through circuit analysis, where did he go wrong with the whole thing? And it turns out, no, he didn't go wrong. And then he uncovers the manual for the thing. And the manual just basically, it's just like the crane game. It says, well, how much would you like this machine to win? How often do you want to let them have a fair shot? And it basically comes down to like, 1 out of every 50 times will give you a fair shot. The other 49 times, even if you hit it precisely to the 5th decimal place, exactly at the right time, we will record it as if it was either 1 early or 1 late. Because all we do is we just light up the one thing and we don't light up the other thing. And we certainly don't dispense the 500 tickets to you. It's a rigged game. You can't win. It's a sucker bet. And to the extent that people are greedy and awful and nasty and give you sucker bets, I got to say that is no fun for anyone. I mean, look, and again, I think this would be a fun series to do, ideally with much better visuals, of just grifts in the comic book industry in general. But because the comic book industry is made out of people, just like everybody else, we all have the same urges to try to get ahead through cleverness and either being really, really sharp with our buying and selling and recognizing, smart opportunities in the market, or just out of being greedy. There are people who said, well, like, I can run the scam. I know the suckers will go for it. And which, to the extent it's like a carnival barker, and you're being gypped, and that the tattooed lady isn't really all that, or like the fish person, the 2-headed girl is really just a couple people wearing a skin suit. I mean, to the extent that it's a fake, then you have fun and it's all good times. To the extent that you don't know you're getting ripped off, I got a problem with you. And to the extent that even under the terms that you've given them, right? Even if they play the game the right way and they roll the thing and take their chances. I mean, just like with virtually every carnival game that you'll ever play on the Midway, virtually every single one of them is rigged. It's not an honest game. You should just, as an adult, just walk on by. The guy with the hammer, the hammer game, he's got a foot switch which determines if he likes you, whether you will ever win. And if he doesn't like you, he's going to flip it the other way, and no matter how much you wail on that thing, it will never ring the bell. The bottle game at the carnival, when he demos, oh no, it's easy, you just throw it like that, and you realize that a couple of the later on that a couple of the bottles have lead weights on the bottom of the whole thing. If he rearranges those stack of bottles, he put those towards the top, you almost can't lose. If you put those at the bottom, oh darn, you knocked them off, but they didn't clear the table, and you'll never make it. Almost every carnival game is rigged in some way like that, and so it's virtually impossible, except by the luckiest possible chances, to win it straight. The only other ones you ever win are the ones where, quite like the Bry one, is think about like the fish pond game. The fish pond game, where you got the little fishing reel on the whole thing, and it's the one you give the kids, guaranteed winner every time. Same thing goes with like the throw the darts at the balloon game. It's like, $5, you get 3 darts, and kid, you tried hard, I'll just give you an extra dart. They'll let you play till you win, darn, because I don't want to leave you sad when you come over here. And the whole idea is that, yeah, you paid $5 for your darts, but the prizes have an average value of $1.20. And so even when you lose, and that's kind of the game we're playing here. I think everyone playing this particular game ought to be adult enough to know they're being played. And so if you want to play or don't want to play, I don't really have a problem either way. I figure you're adults, you spin the wheel, you take your chances. As far as I can tell, it's not a rational game on any level. You're guaranteed to lose basically 20% of your money, and honestly, you're going to wind up with a bunch of variants that you probably didn't want anyway. And I mean, if you just took the same variants and offered them for sale individually at eBay, I think Bry would have a hell of a hard time getting rid of them. I say it's based on other things. Is that we thought just for laughs one year it might be fun to get in on when they did the Dark Knight 3. They offered to store variants, and we actually made inquiries and say, well, how many copies of Dark Knight 3 do we have to buy to get an Atomic Avenue variant? And we considered it, and it's like we could swing that. It might be fun to do, but then we thought, oh Jesus Christ! I know we'll sell the first 200 pretty quickly, but after that, are we going to have crates and crates of unsold Atomic Avenue variant Dark Knight 3s kicking around the office for the next 6 years? And then we kind of shuddered and went, oh, how about we don't? And so we went on our merry way and did something else. So that's my take on the whole thing. I hope you guys are having fun. Anyway, that will do it for now, and I will see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.